At first glance, the photograph feels harmless. A young girl stands proudly beside her bicycle, boots neatly placed on the dirt road. Hands resting on the handlebars, as though she's been waiting patiently for the photographer to finish his work. Her dress is pressed, her hair carefully tied back. She is smiling, not broadly, but with the quiet satisfaction of someone certain they are being remembered. The year written on the back of the photograph reads 1902. People linger on it longer than they expect to. There is something comforting about the image, the stillness, the honesty of an era that didn't know how to lie with photographs yet. The bicycle gleams faintly in the sunlight, its thin tires casting delicate shadows. The girl's eyes seem to follow you no matter where you stand, though that's easy enough to explain away. Old lenses did that sometimes. It's only when someone decides to zoom in that the mood changes. Not suddenly, not dramatically, just enough for the room to grow quiet. The smile, when enlarged, doesn't quite reach her eyes. One hand grips the handlebar too tightly, knuckles pale despite the soft lighting, and behind her, just beyond the edge of the dirt road, something interrupts the background. A shape, a blur, too defined to be a flaw, too deliberate to be ignored. The bicycle casts a shadow in one direction. The girl casts it in another. Once you see it, you can't unsee it, and the longer you stare, the more it feels as though the photograph is no longer frozen in time, but waiting for something to happen again. The photograph appears, at first, to be nothing more than a relic of a gentler time. Taken in 1902, it carries the familiar imperfections of early photography: soft edges, uneven lighting, and a faint grain that settles like dust across the image. Yet these flaws only add to its charm. The subject is a young girl, perhaps 9 or 10 years old, standing beside her bicycle on what looks like a quiet dirt road. Her posture is upright, careful, as if she has been instructed not to move until the moment is captured. In an era when photographs were rare and deliberate, every pose mattered, and hers suggests pride rather than nervousness. Her clothing reflects modest prosperity. The dress is clean and well-fitted, its fabric heavy enough to hold shape, with buttons aligned neatly down the front. Her boots are polished, placed squarely on the ground, toes forward. Nothing about her appearance hints at hardship or neglect. The bicycle beside her is equally telling, a well-maintained machine with thin metal spokes and a sturdy frame, the kind that would have been treasured rather than casually owned. In 1902, such an object symbolized freedom, progress, and a family willing to invest in something beyond survival. What draws people in most, however, is her expression. The girl is smiling, but not with the exaggerated cheer often seen in posed photographs of the time. It is restrained, natural, as though she is genuinely pleased to be there. Her eyes are open and steady, meeting the lens without fear or shyness. There is an assumption of safety in her gaze, a belief that the world in front of her is predictable and kind. Viewers often describe feeling an unexpected warmth when they first look at the photograph, a sense that they are being invited into a moment that was meant to be preserved, not questioned. The background reinforces this innocence. There are no looming structures, no crowds, no signs of chaos or intrusion. Just open space, a road stretching out of frame, and indistinct shapes that suggest trees or fencing softened by the limits of the camera. The scene feels complete, self-contained, as if nothing beyond the photograph matters. It represents a pause in time, a single breath held more than a century ago. Because of this, the image is often shared as an example of early photographic beauty. People comment on the simplicity, the humanity, the quiet dignity of a child and her bicycle. They trust the image instinctively, believing it shows exactly what it appears to show: a happy girl, a proud moment, a life briefly and lovingly recorded. The shift begins not with fear, but with curiosity. Someone, somewhere, decides to look closer, not because the photograph feels wrong, but because it feels too perfect to ignore. The image is scanned at a higher resolution, uploaded to a screen where fingers can pinch and expand what once fit neatly in the palm of a hand. At first, nothing changes. The girl remains where she is, her bicycle steady, her smile intact. The grain of the photograph becomes more pronounced, the tiny imperfections of early film blooming into visible texture. It feels like peeling back history rather than disturbing it. As the zoom continues, the background starts to separate into layers. What once appeared as a soft blur resolves into shapes, with edges and intent. The dirt road shows uneven grooves, pressed by wheels long gone. The fence line in the distance looks older than expected, its posts leaning at angles that suggest years of neglect, even at the moment the photograph was taken. These are harmless discoveries, the kind that make historians smile. They give weight to the past, confirm authenticity, make the image feel even more real. Then, the eye catches on something that doesn't quite settle. Just behind the girl's left shoulder, near the edge of the frame, there is a form that resists clarity. Zooming in should make it sharper, but instead it becomes more ambiguous. It is darker than the surrounding background, yet not dark enough to be a shadow. It has a shape, but not one that can be easily named. It seems almost pressed into the photograph, rather than existing naturally within it, as if it were added after the moment had already passed. People argue at first. Some insist it's a trick of the light, a chemical irregularity in the film, or a smudge on the original plate. Early photography was notorious for such flaws. Others suggest it could be a person standing just out of focus or an object caught mid-motion. The explanations sound reasonable, comforting even. The mind prefers technical answers over unsettling ones. But the more the image is examined, the less those explanations hold. The shape does not align with the direction of the light. It does not blur the way motion should. It seems aware of the frame, positioned too deliberately to be accidental. When contrast is adjusted, its edges appear momentarily defined, then slip away again, as though refusing to be fully revealed. What makes this discovery unsettling is not what the shape looks like, but how it behaves under scrutiny. It changes depending on who is looking and how closely. Some see a figure turned sideways. Others see nothing more than an absence, a gap where something should be. Yet everyone agrees on one thing: it was not noticeable until the zoom, and once noticed, it draws the eye back to it again and again, quietly challenging the innocence the photograph once held. Attention inevitably returns to the girl herself. After the background has been examined and debated, viewers begin to study her with a new intensity, as though the photograph has shifted its focus without changing its subject. The smile that once seemed gentle now feels carefully arranged, the kind that holds steady not because it is natural, but because it must. When magnified, the corners of her mouth appear tense, the muscles pulled into place rather than relaxed. It is subtle, the sort of detail the human eye ignores, until given a reason to doubt. Her eyes become the next point of fixation. In early photographs, long exposure times often left subjects with unfocused or glassy expressions. Yet her gaze is unusually sharp. When zoomed in, the pupils appear darker than expected, absorbing light instead of reflecting it. There is no visible glint, no soft highlight to suggest moisture or movement. The eyes seem fixed, in a way that feels less like patience and more like endurance, as if she is holding still for longer than anyone should. Then there is her posture. At a distance, she stands proudly beside the bicycle, balanced and composed. Up close, the alignment of her shoulders feels off by a fraction. One shoulder sits slightly higher than the other, not in a natural slouch, but in a way that suggests tension running through her body. Her neck looks rigid, stretched just enough to keep her face angled toward the camera without turning her head. It gives the impression of someone being positioned rather than posing. The most disturbing detail emerges when the light and contrast are adjusted. The bicycle's shadow stretches cleanly across the ground, thin and precise, following the expected direction of the sun. The girl's shadow, however, does not match. It falls at a different angle, softer at the edges, but undeniably separate in direction. This is not the kind of error easily dismissed as a photographic flaw. Early cameras could distort faces, blur motion, even double, expose images, but shadows obeyed the laws of light. Some attempt to rationalize it. Once doubt has taken hold, the search for answers moves beyond the photograph itself. Names are requested, origins questioned, and what was once an image admired for its beauty becomes an object of investigation. Historians and enthusiasts begin where they always do, with records. The year is known, the approximate age of the girl can be estimated, and the bicycle suggests a certain level of economic stability. In theory, she should exist somewhere beyond the image, anchored in census rolls, parish registries, school records, or family albums. The process starts locally. The photograph is traced back to a small region based on the style of clothing, the type of bicycle, and the landscape visible behind her. Archives from nearby towns are examined, listing births and households from the late 19th century into the early 20th. Girls of similar age are catalogued, families cross-referenced, surnames compared. At first, the absence of a clear match is not alarming. Records from that era are often incomplete, lost to fires, floods, or simple neglect, but the gaps begin to feel intentional rather than accidental. No family photographs surface showing the same child. No studio portraits, no school group pictures, no church confirmations. Even families known to have owned bicycles during that period show no connection to a daughter who resembles her. It is as though the girl exists only at the exact moment the photograph was taken, with no past leading up to it, and no future extending beyond it. Researchers widen the scope. They search death records, assuming perhaps she died young, erased from memory by grief or time. Still nothing. No matching burial, no obituary, no mention in local newspapers of a child lost to illness or accident. Entire families can be traced across generations, yet there is no space where she should fit. The silence around her becomes louder than any evidence. More unsettling still is the absence of the photographer. Early photographs were often signed or documented, especially when taken outdoors with bulky equipment. Studios kept logs, and traveling photographers left trails of advertisements and receipts. In this case, no such trail exists. The photograph appears without context, unattached to a known collection, as if it surfaced on its own. The lack of records transforms the question. It is no longer about who the girl was, but whether she ever was at all. A photograph is supposed to prove existence, to anchor a person in time. Here, it does the opposite. It presents a face the world remembers but history refuses to acknowledge. The more thoroughly the archives are searched, the clearer it becomes that the image does not document a life. It interrupts the record, inserting something that leaves no imprint beyond its own unsettling presence. The final realization does not arrive as a single revelation, but as a slow, reluctant convergence of details that can no longer be separated. Once the photograph has been examined, magnified, catalogued, and stripped of every comforting explanation, what remains is a pattern that resists logic. The inconsistencies are not random. They align too neatly, as if the image were designed to withstand scrutiny, while quietly punishing it. The strange background form, the mismatched shadow, the unnatural stillness in the girl's eyes, and the complete absence of historical trace all point in the same direction. People begin to notice something else, something harder to measure. The photograph feels different the longer it is studied. Viewers report a growing discomfort, a sense that their attention is being acknowledged. It is not fear in the traditional sense, but a pressure, as though the act of observation has become reciprocal. The girl's gaze, once interpreted as calm confidence, now feels fixed on the present rather than the past. Her eyes do not belong to a child waiting patiently in 1902. They belong to something enduring, something aware. When the image is compared to other photographs from the same era, the difference becomes clearer. Those images feel distant, sealed behind time. This one does not. It feels active. The longer it is displayed on a screen, the more viewers describe subtle changes that cannot be confirmed. The suggestion that her head is angled slightly differently, that the grip on the handlebar appears tighter than before. Screenshots taken minutes apart show no measurable alteration, yet the feeling persists, shared by too many people to dismiss as imagination. The most unsettling conclusion emerges not from what the photograph shows, but from what it seems to do. It draws focus, invites zooming, encourages examination, as though it were constructed to be discovered slowly. The moment the truth begins to surface is the moment the image feels most complete, as if the act of realization fulfills its purpose. This leads to an idea few are comfortable voicing. The photograph was not taken to remember a girl, but to preserve an encounter. In this understanding, the camera did not capture an innocent moment. It recorded the presence of something that understood the mechanism being used, something that allowed itself to be seen only partially, hiding its nature behind the familiar shape of a child. The smile, the bicycle, the quiet road, all become elements of a disguise rather than details of a life. What the photograph ultimately reveals is not a secret buried in the past, but a reminder that some things do not exist within time as humans understand it. They do not leave records, do not age, do not die. They appear briefly, just long enough to be noticed. And when they are noticed, they are already looking back.